Adapting a hand knitting pattern to be made on the machine is not always straightforward, but it is possible. Today I'm working with the latest doodle cowl from Pacific Knit Co. There's a link in the description. Cowls are a great starting point if you're new to adapting patterns because they're just a big rectangle. I like these doodle cowls because they come with a lot of Fair Isle motifs, and part of the fun is picking the order and then picking out the colors to go with them. The motifs are 24 stitches wide, so they're punch card friendly, but I'll be working with AYAB. I'm currently test knitting this pattern, so some of it might look different by the time it's published. There are a few adjustments we need to make before we can knit this on the machine. If you were to knit this by hand, you'd knit it in the round, but we can't do color work in the round on the machine, so we'll be knitting it flat and then adding a side seam. The pattern recommends DK weight yarn and a specific gauge, but I'm working with my standard gauge machine and fingering weight yarn, so I'm not going to get that gauge. Conveniently, the pattern comes with a diagram of the finished cowl, so I know what measurements I need to get the same look. I'm going to knit a bunch of swatches and then take the gauge from the swatch and do the math to try to get the same size and shape from my machine. The first step is to digitize the doodle charts. I work with AYAB, which is an open source hardware and software project to retrofit the vintage knitting machines to be controlled by computer. There are detailed instructions about how to do this on the AYAB website, which is linked in the description. Then I can load up these files and do some swatching. This is what the next version of AYAB is going to look like. I'm using it because I've been doing some development and debugging. If you want to get involved in the project, there is a link to our Discord in the description. Okay, so I have a bunch of swatches, and these have been washed, so let's go through them. I'm not a fan of this one. The snowflake motif kind of got lost, so I'm probably not going to use this one. The color contrast on this is not quite high enough for what I'm going to, so I'm not going to be using the green. But I like the rest of these. This one's got some long floats, but those aren't too hard to catch as I go. So I'll be using these colors and these motifs. And I knit these at a bunch of different tensions, so let me find one that I like. This is too tight. This one is about right. Let's see, what are you? Tension 5. That's not quite right. Okay, so we'll go with tension 5. And we need to gauge from that, so this one's tension 5, and we can just count the number of stitches and the number of rows in a 2-inch square and then divide. So let me do that. Let's see, that comes out to 10.5 rows. And then, let's see, let's call that 7.5 stitches. So that's the gauge we get from this tension and this yarn on this machine. Now, the final cowl is going to be a big rectangle. Normally you'd knit this in the round, but because we're making it on the machine, we are going to knit it flat. So the final width is going to be 20 inches, and the height is going to be 22 inches. Then from our gauge, we know that to get 20 inches wide, this needs to be 150 stitches, and 22 inches long is going to be 231 rows. Okay, so this is doable because we get 200 stitches on the standard gauge machine. But the problem is our motifs are 24 stitches wide. So we need to make the width a multiple of 24. Okay, so let's see, 150 divided by 24 is 6.25. So 150 is not evenly divisible by 24. So what we could do is pick a lower number. So 6 times 24 is going to be 144, and it'll just be slightly smaller, but I'd like my cowl to be a little bigger. So let's go with 7 repeats instead of 6. So we can just call that 168. And we can fudge these numbers a little bit because this is a cowl and the final size is still going to fit even if it's a little bit different than what the pattern suggests. And then we need to pick all of our motifs so that they add up to roughly 231. Again, it doesn't need to be perfect. We can fudge it a little bit. But I have 1, 2, 3, 4 colors that I want to work with. And I'm thinking that... So, knitting by machine, the hardest part of this whole process is going to be swapping out the cones for different colors. So I think what I'm going to do is just make this in 4 sections of different colors and just transition between them. Like maybe it'll go this cream color and then the light blue and then this teal and then the darker blue and then back to the cream color and just go that way. So we have 231 rows total, and if we split that into 4 sections, it's about 58 rows per section. So I just need to find a combination of doodles that reaches about 58, and then I will just repeat that 4 times as I knit. All right, let me look through the doodles that I've digitized. So here's what I came up with. Reindeer, tree, snowflake, aurora borealis, and I'll just repeat this 4 times. I'm casting onto waste yarn because we need a live edge to graft later. I'm also adding an extra stitch to each end for the side seam. This is my Brother 910 standard gauge knitting machine, and as you can see, I have ripped its guts out and replaced them with some custom hardware so I can control this from my computer. I need a few inches of waste yarn. Now, before switching to my main yarn, I'm going to get set up for pattern knitting. I'm setting my carriage to KC1 because it does end needle selection, and that will give us a neater seam. The beep tells me it's ready to knit. Now that the needles have been selected, I can switch to the main yarn. The background color goes in the main feeder, and I'm making a slip knot and hooking the yarn over one of the clamps down below. Contrasting color goes in the second feeder, same slip knot. Hit the MC button and we're good to go. The needles that are selected knit the contrasting color, and the next row gets set up as I go. That's about it. It's just a lot of knitting from here. There are some long floats, so I'm just going to catch them on the next row. The claw weights on the edges need to be moved up as the piece gets longer. I'm swapping out yarns every repeat. Yes, this machine has a second spot for a tension mast in the center that I could use, but it gets in the way of the overhead camera. I'm leaving a long tail to graft the two ends together later. Then back to plain knitting and take the whole thing off on waste yarn. Here's the finished piece. Now I'm Kitchener stitching the beginning and the end together. Finally, remove the waste yarn. The starting yarn doesn't unravel as well, so I'm trying to pull out just the last row of stitches. But this is unmercerized cotton, so it's not very strong. Perfect. Then it's just a mattress stitch for the side seam. I turned the seam to the inside so it's even less noticeable. Here's the final cowl, washed and blocked. What do you think? I hope that you've learned adapting a cowl is not scary. It just takes some patience and some math. Go check out the rest of Pacific Knit Co.'s doodle cowls. There are some fun ones in there. There's a link to the pattern for this one in the description. Thanks for watching. Happy knitting. Alright, and then we do outside.